Alright, we are in the week 13, toward the end of the semester, on the first day of the week. And so sorry about the pause. Here we're gonna just go over the chapter 22 for the lecture part, but we are going over the blood vessel structure only. In this chapter we're gonna see that what are the general types of the blood vessels that we have in the body, arteries, veins, and capillaries, and then we go over the details of each one of them, but generally is mostly about the structure of a vessel as a tube and all those layers that they have. More of the blood vessel regarding all the distribution of the blood vessels throughout the body, all the organs that are receiving the blood vessels, and all those ones, we are going over all those in the lab part that we have for the lab 24. So for the lecture, besides this one that I'm going to review, that we have the chapter 23 for the lymphatic system. So let's start with the chapter 22 for the blood vessel structure. So first I put some explanation regarding the importance of the blood vessel in the cardiovascular system, following the two other parts that are heart and the blood that we have discussed in the previous chapter. Now we are going to talk about the blood vessels. I put some videos here to grab your attention. Some of these have some pictures that, although our chapter is very detailed, sometimes students get lost in the details. So many of these videos that I put here grab your attention to the whole picture, that how we have artery start from the heart, take the blood away from the heart, then it gets to the capillaries, and then exchange of the material is done inside of the capillaries, and then the blood gets back through a vein through the heart. So that's the general picture. But in the chapter, as you know, in the heart we discussed that we have two types of the circulation. If it is a systematic circulation, it might be the aorta and goes to every single parts of the body, exchange the material with the tissue of that part, and then bring back blood to the right atrium. If this was in the pulmonary circulation, then it would be like the pulmonary trunk that takes the blood away from the right ventricle and then goes finally at the end to the pulmonary capillaries around the alveoli, and then exchange of the gas, all those over there, and then brings the blood back with the change of the concentration of the gases in the vein compared to the artery, and then brings it back to the left atrium. But here in this chapter we are focusing on the layers that we have in the vein, compare that to the artery, different types of the artery that we have. Like if it is aorta, it has lots of elastic fibers, we call them elastic artery, right? And what's the importance of having elastic artery? What's the role of that? That helps that the blood to be pushed all the way to the end of, for example, the very far away end of the fingers or end of the toes and all the other things. And also the structure of the vein, what is different between the structure of the wall of the vein compared to the artery in general, the shape, the size of the lumen, and all those things, that those are very important. You need to know for lecture and lab all these things. And also regarding the capillaries and three different types of the capillaries that we have, and where in the body we find any of these different types, and some examples of the naming of each different types and all those things, and much more that you have all in the videos and the PowerPoint and study guide of the chapter. But these videos here, short videos here, can serve very well to, just as they are very short, give you an overview and go over the material to get familiar before jumping to those detailed explanations. This is one article that is very good when you go over to compare different vessels and all the things on that. And then here you have the one example regarding the importance of the blood vessels and how when something is wrong it can affect the whole body, as we have high blood pressure here, as we have it here, and explaining what is it and what is gonna do and how we measure it and all those things. It shows that when we have blood vessels that are spreading all over the body, if something wrong with the structure of the blood vessel, it may not get limited to one specific part of the body. It may be involved all blood vessels in the body over there, right? So pay attention to that one. And later on, when you go to the clinic and you are going to start diagnosing and all those things, always pay attention that some systemic diseases like the high blood pressure or diabetes that is going to affect the blood vessels, they are always beyond one specific area. Like for example, if you see that the vessels of the foot has got involved due to the problem to a vessel, there are some difficulty in that area, you should get back to check all the other parts of the body too. Like for example, if somebody has the retinopathy, like the retina of the eye has problem, and if that one is due to the vessels that are going, it might be due to the hypertension, it might be due to the diabetes mellitus or any other vasculopathy, right? So all those ones, they always, you have to go back and search all the other parts of the body too, to make sure that the vessels of the heart are not involved, the vessels of the brain are not involved, the kidney is not involved, and all the many things. Although many times the source of the blood pressure, high blood pressure, is from the difficulties in the kidneys. So just was a brief regarding the importance of all the blood vessels, but we are not able to just go every things regarding the blood vessel. We just having an introduction to the structure and importance of the blood vessels in our body. And here you have the PowerPoint and study guide for this one. Pay attention, this part we are just talking about the structure of the blood vessel as we explained, but you need to know all the blood vessels that we have in the body and their naming, as to the point that I have put that in the lab. And pay attention that you need to know them not only for the lab, you need to know all those naming for the lecture part too, as the lab and lecture are not separate from each other. And then here you have the two videos that we have here for the structures of the blood vessels, part 1 and part 2. Any question here? So as I was explaining, if any time you have any question, you can raise your hand and I pause the video and I can answer your question if you don't want to be show up in the video. So let's go back to the next chapter, that is chapter 23. So chapter 23, it is lymphatic system. Lymphatic system, we go over lymphatic system next to the cardiovascular system, because lymphatic system have several functions, that one part of that is very related to the cardiovascular system. Lymphatic system is a big and important system of the body, and one part of the function that is doing is regarding the immunity of our body. Okay, sorry about the pause. So I was saying that the lymphatic system has some important roles. One of them, or one big part of that, is the immunity of the whole body. But beyond that, we cannot go much over that part, because that's a very big part and so many detail about that part. And in general, we don't have such a time to go over all those parts in our course, but we try to just put a brief regarding the lymphatic system to just start getting familiar. What is lymphatic system? What are the organs that we have in the lymphatic system? And what are the general function of the lymphatic system? And here, besides that,
Professor
yes?
Nadia, did you mean to share your screen?
Oops.
And it's not recording either, I don't think.
It was recording, but
well, we can't see your screen.
I don't know why this changed after we changed sharing a screen. Why the setting is changed? So let me see.
We can see it.
Okay. Oh, I think this part was recorded too, but I try to cut it. Alright, so it is recorded, okay? So here, let me explain again, as I'm not sure that it's been recorded properly or not. So we were talking about the lymphatic system, that for the lymphatic system, this is a system of the body that has several functions. One main function of that is regarding the immunity of the body. Like any infection that happens, that's the system that goes to fight with that. That's the one that has the white blood cell, a big part of the white blood cell, or part of that one, and all those things. So you're gonna learn about that when you have a course that talking about the immune system of the body, different types of the lymphocytes, B lymphocytes, T lymphocytes, even different types of the T lymphocytes. Which one of them is going to fight the bacterial infection? Which one of them is going to fight the viruses? Like, for example, what is that is indicator, for example, when somebody has HIV infection, that is a viral infection, and all those things, right? So it has a big area by itself that has to be discussed and studied separately. We do not have such a time to go in our short course here, right? But still, we're gonna cover that one to at least to start knowing the organs that we have in the lymphatic system, and also some basic function that it has. So among those ones, besides the immunity, among the functions beside the immunity system and fighting with the invader or even with the cancer cells and all those things, but we have other parts that is like for the dealing and helping the cardiovascular system, and that's the reason that we put and study lymphatic system, even though in brief, next to the cardiovascular system. And we have explained about that one here in the whole chapter, that not the whole chapter, we're just covering a small part of that, but we have discussed that how the lymphatic system is helping to just help the circulation of the fluid in the body. So let me see, I do not have a video for that here, but all these other video and the article that I put here explaining that completely, and I will try to put a video regarding those parts that you need to know, but all the PowerPoint and study guide that I put over there, it's very clear regarding this part of the lymphatic system. So generally, as I have this picture here, I can explain it over that this part of the lymphatic system that deals with the cardiovascular system or helps cardiovascular system hand in hand to make the whole system works is about the fluid that we have. Like imagine if you see here, you have the heart, sends the blood out through the arteries. Then those arteries spread, get smaller until the capillaries, that the tiniest blood vessels, get near every single cell of the body. So every cell that you have in the body, it has a vessel that passing nearby to bring the nutrient and the oxygen to that cell to exchange that with the cells. On the other hand, the exchange from the cell, after the metabolism that has been done, all those nutrients has been consumed. Now they have breakdown. For example, if it was glucose, they have breakdown to the carbons, and all the carbons got separated as the carbon dioxide, right? And the energy have been used. The energy ATP that have been produced during this process have been used, right? Now those carbon dioxide has to get back to those capillaries and continue these capillaries and continue their way to the venous side to get back into the back. Now in the area of the capillary that we have here, the capillaries of the blood vessels, when they are going to exchange with these cells, these have been shown simply as the cells that we have. For example, if there is the glucose here has got through the blood after material have been digested in the digestive system, break down to the smallest ingredient like the glucose, now have got back to the heart and then now circulating throughout the body, right? And then get to every single cell of the body that needs that. So those ones, like the glucose, has its own channel that has to pass through that, but the gases, they're just going through the simple diffusion. So let's go with the gas, right? So if there is a oxygen here, because it is coming from the heart, from the left side of the heart that has received all the oxygen from the lung already, right? So it's full of the oxygen. The concentration of the oxygen is higher, getting into the interstitium. Interstitium is the space between the cells, right? Out of the blood vessels and between the cells, all these space between the cells. Then again, according to the concentration, oxygen, when it gets here, now makes this area higher concentration of the oxygen. Then that one moves toward the cell that has lower concentration of the oxygen, because it already has used its oxygen in the mitochondria to produce ATP, right? So as you see, the gases are moving according to simple diffusion, gradient of the concentration. The same way, the water, some water is moving from inside of the capillary to the interstitium, and some of those water gets into the cell if the cell needs fluid, right? The point here is that some of those fluid remained in the interstitial space here, right? And if there is no system to bring that back into the capillary system and the venous system to get it back to the heart, it makes the accumulation of those fluid inside of the interstitium and interstitial tissue, right? And after a while, it causes the edema, like all those swelling that you may see in diseases that may happen if the system is not able to work. That's, they call it like a sewage system, right? That bring back the fluid, make it to circulate and get back and get out of the area, right? So these ones cannot get back to this side of capillary and continue their way. Therefore, we have another system that those are some other tiny capillaries that are not blood vessel capillaries. Those are lymphatic capillaries. So those lymphatic capillary is not a continuation of any other vessel. They start here in the interstitium among the cells that are around them. So the fluid that we have between the cell, now they can absorb into these lymphatic capillaries. Those lymphatic capillaries take that fluid and they continue their way, and as you see here have been shown in part by part because they have some valve, and when the fluid passed through that one cannot get back to the original place it was, and this is gonna help them until like here on the way you see that they are passing, because it's not only fluid, if there is other infection around also it can grab them and then present that to the lymph node here on the way. But regarding the fluid, they continue their way. All these small lymphatic vessels connect to each other, finally make the large lymphatic vessels, and then at the end when they get into the at the level of the subclavian veins, they in the both sides they pour into the subclavian veins over. So that's the part that is related to this function of the lymphatic system, to grab all those extra fluid and then makes it to circulate, get back to the blood vessel, so that our body doesn't lose fluid in one hand, because otherwise all the fluid may go out of the blood vessels, and then after a while heart is not able to push effectively because it's low in the volume, right? On the other hand, to prevent the edema in the tissues of the body. So that is that part. And the other things, that the third function that we can mention regarding the lymphatic system is that the part that is dealing with the digestive system, that some nutrient including some fat they are transporting through the lymphatic vessels, because they cannot go into the capillaries of the blood vessels. So these are mainly the function that you see some videos, these are very good videos that can explain those ones, and you have all those ones in the lecture slides, and also I will put the video for the explanation of these ones for you too. Let's get loaded here. That's slow. It's not coming. Okay, so yes, yeah. So you see here that it shows all those, you see that how they start from somewhere in the body and they connect to each other, become bigger, and finally make the bigger, right? And as the lymph is green, I put that in there. So we have the lymph like blood. This is a connective tissue that equivalent to the blood, but it doesn't have the component of the blood, like no red blood cell in that one. It has its own composition, and you learn about that one some here. And then the lymphatic vessels, how they are different from the blood vessels, like for example it starts from the capillaries, like for example in the digestive system, those tiny capillary of the lymphatic capillaries, they called lacteal, they are getting the fat inside of the digestive system and then continue connecting to each other, make the bigger vessel, and finally put those ones as the same way that we said, pours back into the blood vessels near the heart. And then lymphoid organs. So it talk about the lymph first, that how it composed of, what do we have in the lymph? Interstitial fluid, some lymphocytes and macrophages. And lymphatic vessels that we have there, they are passing through the lymphoid tissues and pass through the lymphoid organs, like the same way that you saw that those vessels are passing through a lymph node. That was one example, right? And then it's talking about the the classification of the organs that we have primary organs or tissues of the lymphoid organs. The thymus and the bone marrow are the primary one, and then we have secondary organs, that tonsils, lymph nodes, spleen, and the other ones that we call it mucosa associated lymphoid tissue, or an abbreviation they call it MALT, M-A-L-T, mucosa associated lymphoid tissue. Those are the lymphoid tissue that we have in the mucosa membrane of those organs that they have that one. So these all four are the secondary organs, and pay attention for the lymph node. We have different areas of the body. They have been named according to the area that they are located into that, because these lymph nodes, as they are superficial, they can be palpated. Therefore, during the examination, you can notice that if they are tender, means that if they have been pushed, make the pain, right? So usually that happens when there is an infection in that area, that although it may seem painful and cruel, but that's actually a good sign, because like for example, when you have a pharyngitis, you will see that the cervical lymph node may get tender. Even sometimes you even cannot eat very well without pain, right? But this is a good sign that your immunity system is working and is fighting the infection in one hand. On the other side, we said that sometimes lymph nodes may get large, and this whole lymphatic system may get involved with fighting with the cancerous cells, right? In that case, these lymph nodes may get large, but most of the times they are not painful, because this is not an infection process, and that one is the thing that we don't like when we see that, right? So here you see that a picture of many of the nodes that you see, and also these vessels, lymphatic vessels. And we have talked about the two systems that we have on the right side and on the rest of the body, right? So as you see that in the bigger magnification, you see that here that you have all these capillaries or joining, passing through some lymph node, and then finally they gather together all these area. And this is, as you see, this is the right side, that they are all ending, including the right side of the head and neck and the upper limb and the chest here. All these ones, they go into one duct that we call it right lymphatic duct. So pay attention, this is only on the right side of the head and neck, right upper limb, and right side of the thoracic cavity. But the rest of the body, including the two lower limb, all of them, the abdomen, all these ones, they are coming to the cisterna chyli. Cisterna chyli is a big part of the lymphatic system, that all these lower parts come here and then continue their way through that one. Then it passes through the abdomen and goes into the thoracic cavity on the left side, and it gathers all these ones from the left side too, from the left side of the head and neck, and then from the left upper limb, and all these ones. And this is the ones that going to make the thoracic duct, that is actually left lymphatic duct, but is famous as the thoracic duct. You may not hear that as left lymphatic duct as much as you hear thoracic duct. And you need to know all these areas that are drained by the thoracic duct compared to the areas that are drained by the right lymphatic duct. So hopefully all got clear regarding that one. And these are talking about the functions, the three functions that I mentioned, that they produce, the lymphatic system produce, maintain, and distribute lymphocytes, B lymphocyte and T lymphocytes. Maintain, not produce of all of them is inside of the lymphatic system, but at least the distribution of them all over there. Maintain normal blood volume, as we discussed, and provide alternative route for the transport of, as we said, some nutrients, like example as fat, hormones, and the waste, right? And here you see the picture that how when the blood has come through the artery, these are tiny arteries, we call it arteriole, right? These are very tiny that we cannot see them by the bare eye, right, as the big arteries. Then they make the capillary bed here, and they continue their way, blood continue its way through the vein. So nearby, as this is the area that the exchange of the material is done between the capillary and the cells, then all those extra fluid get into these lymphatic capillaries and then continue their way to go to the bigger lymphatic vessels, right? Then the other things, pay attention that we mentioned that the lymphatic vessels have valve, because there is no push of the fluid behind that, like the heart that we have that push and circulates as a circle, right? They start here. So when the around wall is pushing them, they need a valve to prevent the fluid to get back, the same way that we had it in the vein of the blood vessels, right? Make sure that you pay attention to the picture of the capillary vessels and the valve that we have inside of them. And this is just an explanation that what nutrients are, for example, just example, not all of them, some lipids that we talked about that they get into the blood through the lymphatic vessels. And here is showing that some of the lymph cells, lymphocytes that we have here, and all the things around. And as we said, we have the lymphatic capillaries. Those are small vessels that they start at the beginning, and then they join each other to at the end to make the lymphatic ducts. And these are all that I showed you, that how thoracic duct is formed. The part that we have, like cisterna chyli, is part of the that pours the ends up to the thoracic duct, and these are the parts that I explained that they are drained all into the lymphatic duct, and also the thoracic duct here, and the right lymphatic duct that we have, that we said that which parts of the body is drained into that one. And in this picture is clearly shown into that. If you remember this picture, you should not have any problem to remembering the drainage of the right lymphatic duct and all these parts that are the drainage of the thoracic duct. And in this picture is showing again the right lymphatic duct and also the thoracic duct that pours, and at the end pours into the subclavian vein on this side and in this side, right before the jugular vein join that one and make the brachiocephalic vein. And when it gets into the venous circulation, goes to the superior vena cava and pours into the right atrium. And in the next one, it just all those fluid continue circulate with the inside of the blood as usual. So the rest of these ones are just for your information, but pay attention that there are some pictures here. Like here you see that how next to the capillaries of the artery and the very tiny vein or venules that have been formed here, you have the capillary, lymphatic capillaries, and you see the valve that they have from the very beginning, and you see that in histology of that, you see the valve. And when you see such a thing, you know that this is the lymphatic capillary, because the venules doesn't have a valve when they are very tiny. We have valve in the venous system in the mid-size vein, not in the venule, right? So that's the difference. When you see a capillary that has the valve, this is a lymphatic capillary. And here is showing all these three of them next to each other, and you see that the wall of the lymphatic vessel even is thinner than the vein. And you already have learned about the difference between the artery and vein, and you know that you will know that when you go over the chapter 22 structure of the artery and vein, that the wall of the artery is thicker compared to the thickness of the wall of the vein, but usually the size of the lumen of the artery is smaller the size of the lumen of the vein, and the whole size of the or diameter of the artery is smaller than the vein. But due to the thinness of the wall of the vein, when at the moment that there is no blood or not passing much through the vein, it will collapse compared to the artery that keeps its shape because of the thickness of the wall, and especially on the arteries that we have elastic fiber. Right. So these are just some pictures to help you to understand the material better, but make sure that you see this it went back up, the picture of the lymphatic vessels with their valve. So that was also almost, I explained everything, so you don't need any separate video as you have here. Any question? Alright, so let's get out of this. That was for the chapter 23 lymphatic vessels, and also you have a study guide. And as the part of the lymphatic system is very short, the study guide is short too, but make sure that you are able to answer all those questions completely. So don't think that as those have been written as the short sentences, the answers is only one word. It means that you should be able to explain all those parts as I explained. So that was regarding the lecture part. Now let's go to the lab part. So for the lab of the blood vessels, as I said in the lecture, we went over the structure of the all blood vessels, artery, capillaries, and veins, different types and everything. Now here in the lab, we are going to learn about how these blood vessels are distributed in the body, starting from the heart. What are the arteries, how they are dividing, how they are going into the upper limb, how they are going to the head and neck, how they continue in the thoracic cavity, how they continue in the abdominal cavity, how they continue to go into the lower limbs, and then how they are U-turn and go back all the way up the same way that have gone. Now they get back as the vein and connect to each other, that we call it anastomosis, and then make the bigger vein, and finally they get back all over from the head and neck, from the upper limb, from the lower limb, abdominal and thoracic cavity, and finally all get back to the heart, right? So one important general description that at each part of the body we have one artery, and usually there is one equivalent vein that is going next to that. So we have this artery and vein as a bundle, right? We call it equivalent, or artery and vein. And also besides that, usually we have one nerve that is traveling with them too. Therefore, we call all these three structures, artery, vein, and nerve, as the neurovascular bundle. Neuro is the nerve, vascular is two vessels, right? Artery and vein, right? So whenever we are talking about the comparison of the artery and vein, we are talking about those ones that are traveling alongside each other. We cannot compare the structure of like a big vein that are getting back into the heart, those are biggest vein of the body, right? Compared to a tiny vein that we have in the finger, for example, or compared to a tiny artery that we have in the finger. Whenever we are comparing artery and vein, we are comparing the ones that are at the level of each other, right? Traveling next to each other in a neurovascular bundle, usually, right? And most of the time, those artery and veins have the same name, and that's the one make it easy on many parts of this lab. When you learn the name of the artery, usually the name of the vein is the same. But pay attention that there are some exceptions. Exceptions are mostly of the vessels that we have around the heart. The arteries that are coming out of the heart, like for example aorta or pulmonary trunk, or the veins that are getting back into the heart, like superior vena cava, inferior vena cava, and also the pulmonary veins, right? So these are unique. We don't have next to each other. The other part that there is an exception is for the like some specific areas. Like for example, we have for the artery, as we have this first part. For the lab, I try to put all the videos to explain each part separately, one by one, and also when I get out of this lab, you will see that I put some PowerPoints for each parts of the body, like the artery or the vessels of the head and neck, artery and vein, right? Or the vessels of the upper limb, all the divisions of the artery and then veins that are getting back. For the thoracic cavity, abdominal cavity, and the lower limb, right? The same way I put the videos here. The videos I could find. The first one is the one that I made myself, and you have seen this one before when we were talking about the brain and the blood vessels of the brain. I put it back here so that you review that, make sure that you're not forgetting those ones. And this one we started from the aorta and branching of the aorta. So how we have the ascending aorta, aortic arch, and then we have the branch that going to the head and neck as the common carotid goes external carotid to the outside, internal carotid to the brain, and then the other branch that makes the subclavian goes all the way to the upper limbs, right? All these are separating from the aorta, right? But here we talked only about the aorta and its branches that we have around the heart, and the carotid one that they go toward the head and neck. Then the rest of that, like the subclavian, has been discussed in the upper limb one, that you have it, like these are the thoracic and abdominal part that is talking about the branches of the aorta here. This is a model that we have, and make sure that you see all blood vessels in this model, all the parts, and you understand all the parts, that because it's the whole body has everything together, all parts, right? And so you can see many parts of the abdomen, all these ones here. And also regarding one part that we have some veins that we call it hepatic portal system. So after learning about all these vessels, arteries and veins that are traveling together, you will see that we have some veins that are coming back from the digestive system. After the artery has gone to the digestive system, and then they become capillary. In the capillary, all the material from digestive system, like the glucose, when after breaking down into the smallest unit, like glucose, fructose, and all those things, they get back into the blood, to the capillaries, and they get to the vein. Those veins of the digestive system, when they get back, they form a specific system that we call it hepatic portal system, that I'm going to explain about that a little bit, why we call that one, but you see that one here, right? I will get back to this one and I explain that one, but just you see the anatomy of that here, and in this video has been explained very well, because Sometimes in many of the models, these hepatic portal system have been shown very small, and sometimes it gets lost among the other veins or even among the other arteries. The first thing you have to notice, hepatic portal system is a collection of veins, not arteries, right? And I'm going to explain when we go over the other parts in the drawing. I will show you what it looks like, or get back to this part and I will explain on that one. But just is a collection of the veins that are getting back from the digestive system, different parts of digestive system and spleen, and they get into the liver instead of pouring into the inferior vena cava directly and get back into the heart. They first go into the liver, some interaction is done inside of the liver, and then they get back into the inferior vena cava, and then the blood continue its way to go to the heart. When we go to the digestive system, we will talk about that completely. What is the significance of that? Why do we need such a separate system? But here we are talking about the anatomy of that, how these ones are joining each other and how this system is formed. I'm going to talk about these vessels when we go to the drawing of the blood vessels. So, and this one is another one again regarding the hepatic portal system, and also is showing those parts, those tiny vessels in the organs that are making or coming these vessels from them. And then we have these ones for the arteries of the upper limb. Although these videos may be a little bit long for this place, we usually use short videos, but I found this very comprehensive, so I thought that sometimes spend 10 more minutes. It helps better when you can answer all the questions that you may have, compared that you have to go not only 10 minutes, even 30 minutes to find the answer to the questions, right? And this one is actually very unique video, because these models that we have, they do not show actually the veins very well. They mostly show the arteries. So this professor has made the veins or on the surface of the model with the pipe cleaners and he did actually a very good job. And it's not only for the upper limb, also for the lower limb, from the same professor for the lower limb model that has the arteries, and also made the veins and explained. So one more thing regarding the difference between the arteries and vein. One general description is that in most part of the body, we said that artery and vein are going alongside each other, and in most part that they have the same name with some exception. Like for example, when we have the carotid, common carotid, and then external carotid, internal carotid, those are artery. We do not have carotid vein at all. Those veins that are coming back, we have talked about all those sinuses that are draining the blood from around the brain. So those are the veins that we have, and at the very end, after the sigmoid sinus, they get into the jugular vein, right? So we have the internal jugular vein that brings the blood from around the brain after those dural sinuses. We have the external jugular vein that brings the blood from outside of the skull, and these two are not making any common jugular vein. We do not have any common jugular vein. Both of them separately just go into the subclavian vein, and they are making the two brachiocephalic vein on the both sides, compared to the aortic arch that we had only one brachiocephalic trunk, and then common carotid artery was separating and the left subclavian artery was separating. So these are the parts, as you see again, around the heart are different, right? may have some other differences throughout the body that you have to notice. But another big difference between the artery and veins are that on the limbs, upper limb and lower limb, we have some superficial veins too. For the arteries, most of the arteries in these areas, they are deep arteries that go deep between the muscles, and they get branches to the muscles and to all the other structure, to the bone and to everything, even to the skin and all those ones, right? But they are travel deep. We have a vein that travel alongside those deep arteries too, and they usually have the same name. Like for example, in the arm area, you have the brachial artery, and you have a brachial vein next to that getting back up, right? But besides those deep veins that you have next to the artery, on the upper limb and lower limb, you have some superficial veins too. Those are the ones that when you are looking at your back of the hand, for example, you will see that. Those are the ones that when they want to draw the blood, they find it because they can see that and they can access that very easily because those are superficial, right? In the elbow area, right? So all those ones are superficial, and those are the ones that you need to pay close attention when you are studying all those superficial veins. Like for example, in the lower limb, we have one, or actually the longest vein of the body that we call it great saphenous vein, that starts from the inguinal area and goes all the way to the heel, right? All the whole length of the leg, thigh and leg all together, right? So that's a very long vessel, but is completely superficial. Like when in the cadaver you're gonna start dissecting to just put the skin away, many of the time you push the great saphenous vein away from the body too, because it's totally under the skin, very superficial, right? So those are the ones that we have the list of all the ones that you need to know, and you have to pay close attention to that one to differentiate. So this is about the one that we have here. Now let me explain about the lab and what we have here. Any question? So here for the blood vessel lab here, what we have a pre-lab worksheet. Let me show you because it is very helpful for learning of all the blood vessels here. So I put all the blood vessels pictures, very important ones here, and as you see it has been a pre-lab worksheet before, but as we are not able to just do all those paper stuff, not much this semester, still I put it over there. And I highly recommend that to learn and practice on the naming of the blood vessels, to go and practice on this sheet. Make sure that you write down. You will learn when you are writing, and also say it loud and pay attention to the locations. So you have it starting from the aorta, that how it's branching, ascending aorta, aortic arch that makes the brachiocephalic and all the other. And also the explanation of all these ones are in the previous video that I had for the last semester, and I left that open for you so that you can go refer to this part and learn about all these vessels. So start from the arteries of this area, then it shows the whole body that is continuing for the upper limb, head and neck. Here it shows the external carotid branches, that then aorta, thoracic aorta, abdominal aorta, the branches that we have in the abdominal aorta are important. Then after the aorta finishes, iliac, common iliac, then divides to the external iliac and internal iliac. Internal iliac, that is smaller branch, goes to the pelvis here for the organs that we have inside of the pelvis. External iliac passes under the inguinal ligament, becomes the femoral artery. I'm not going over deep because I have explained all these ones in another video and you can refer to that. Then that femoral passes behind the knee and separates to the tibial and femur, right? Then you have the U-turn of those ones, all the ones from the upper limb. You see that the deep vein have been shown in darker blue, right? And the superficial one have been shown in the lighter blue, right? So pay attention that how these ones finally join each other and make the subclavian vein. And then from here, from head and neck, you have the internal jugular that is bigger, external jugular that goes next to that, and then you have another one that is the vertebral vein, that the same way that you have the vertebral artery from the subclavian artery that went into the into the transverse foramina of the cervical vertebra and passed to make the posterior circulation of the brain, that you all know about that one. Then we have one branch as its vein, vertebral vein, that getting back and pours into the subclavian vein. And this subclavian vein with this internal jugular vein is going to make the brachiocephalic vein. As you see, you have one brachiocephalic vein on the right side, one brachiocephalic vein on the left side, and when these two brachiocephalic veins join each other, make the superior vena cava. One other difference regarding the artery and vein distribution is that you have just at the very end of the superior vena cava, you have one branch, one vein that is joining that right before it goes to the right atrium, that we call it a zygous vein. So in some models you may be able to see that one. Just pay attention to that one. If I show you and ask you a model and ask you what is this thinner branch that goes at the very end of the superior vena cava, pours into that one is a zygous vein. Also here is a good picture to see the hemiazygous vein. So these are some connection between the abdominal wall and the thoracic wall to these big vessels to pour into the superior vena cava or a little bit higher. And then again you see all these other ones, the same way that you had branches of the aorta. If we had aorta here, aorta was in the left side, as the same way that you see aorta here, start from here and then goes to the left side, and all the way long is going down on the left side, right? Inferior vena cava will be here on its right side. So whenever you get lost, especially in the cadaver, the vessels have not been colored in the blue and red, right? You just see two vessels next to each other. Although if you were on the cadaver, you could examine the texture, but still, as these two are very big, sometimes might be confusing. The best clue is the location. Inferior vena cava is located on the right side. Aorta is always on its left side, right? And then we have all these veins that are coming back from all the organs and pour into the inferior vena cava to pass through the diaphragm and pour into the heart to the right atrium. Then you have all these other vessels, like you have the external iliac vein, internal iliac vein, common iliac veins, right and left, and then they pour into they make the inferior vena cava. And then you have the lower limb, arteries from the anterior view, from the posterior view. Pay attention that some vessels can be seen from the anterior side, the other ones can be seen better on the posterior side. And So that one helps you when you're looking at the models to name those vessels on the models, right? And now you see those veins that again we have some deep vein that those are equivalent to the arteries. Besides those, we have some superficial, like here you're looking at the great saphenous vein. As you see, start here and goes all the way to here. As you see, that's very long. Or we have another one, a small saphenous vein here that is located here and finally joins that one that you see some part on this other side too. And here this inside of the abdomen, that you see that like this is the diaphragm, right? Right under diaphragm you have the parts of the digestive system like liver, stomach, part of the small intestine, all this one that makes the large intestine. Some part has been cut so that you see under that and goes to that, right? So you see the branches that are coming from the abdominal aorta are supplying, like this is the first one that is called the celiac trunk, because this trunk by itself is very short, but it makes 3 branches right away after it's coming up, right? That they are supplying different parts. You are going to learn about these ones in the lecture part. Then after that you have another one that starts here, got separated, and it's going to supply all these parts of the small intestine and then some parts of the large intestine up to here that haven't been shown, right? This part of the large intestine is called ascending colon, and this one is transverse colon that have been cut. The rest of that is descending colon, and then you have a S-shaped sigmoid colon, and then at the end becomes straight and goes deep into the pelvis. We call it rectum. So from here, if you put a cut here after the transverse, actually from the end of the transverse colon that you have it here for the last third of the transverse colon, and the rest of that descending colon, sigmoid colon, and rectum, they are supplied by another branch of the aorta that we call it inferior mesenteric artery. This one, right? This same branch all the way here, compared to the superior mesenteric artery that supplied all these small intestine part and also the part of the large intestine here. So these are the arteries that are going to the whole digestive system, including this one that is sending branch to the liver, to the pancreas, and to the stomach and spleen, right? As you see, some part of this going, this one going to the spleen. Now, after this material has gone to the digestive system, exchange the material now is going to get back as the vein, right? So let's go and look at the vein, and this is the one that we call them hepatic portal system, right? First of all, why we call it portal system? I have explained that in the lecture too, but just to see that what's the significance of that. Portal system refers to any system that, in spite of the usual way that we have artery, smaller artery, capillary, then a small vein and the big vein, portal system is a system that doesn't have only one set of capillary. It has 2 sets of the capillary and one type of the vessel that might be artery or vein connecting these 2 sets of the capillary or capillary beds to each other, right? So one example is here. Later when we go to the other parts, or actually we talked about one when we were talking about the brain, hypophyseal that we had over there, portal system that was very tiny, but you saw the significance how 2 sets of the capillary were connecting each other. We have a big scale of that here as the hepatic portal system because it's dealing with the liver, and we call the liver as the hepatic. Now, the first set of capillaries are these ones. After these arteries got very tiny, a smaller arteriole, and finally become tiny capillaries, then they are giving the oxygen to the tissues, the nutrients, some nutrient to the tissue themselves. But pay attention that the main nutrients of the gut has got through the digestive system, through the mouth, stomach, small intestine, have been break down all the way, and in the small intestine they all have been absorbed to the blood and continue their way to the vein. Which vein? After these branches that have been, these parts that have been supplied by the superior mesenteric artery, their blood get back, continuing after capillaries as the superior mesenteric vein, right? From all these parts that have been supplied by the inferior mesenteric artery, all the things that have been absorbed, including the water and whatever gets back to the blood, goes into the inferior mesenteric vein that you see them here. This is inferior mesenteric vein and this is superior mesenteric. Then from the spleen and the stomach, all those ones, they get back into the splenic vein, right? Now you see a splenic vein and inferior mesenteric vein join each other to make one branch here. And then these two are joining the superior mesenteric vein. And these three together, they are making this big vessel here that we call it hepatic portal vein, right? So this hepatic portal vein is going into the liver. When it gets into the liver, this hepatic portal vein, that is a big vein, starts branching, got a smaller venule, and finally becomes capillaries. So here we have the second set of capillaries. As you see, we had capillaries here, the first set of the capillaries, and then they get back through a vein, some veins, a collection of the veins here, and get to the second set of the capillary. That's the reason we call it hepatic portal system, and this is all the structures that you need to know. When we get to the digestive system, we will talk about the liver, what will happen to all those nutrients that have been absorbed to the blood and come back here. And why do we need the blood passes through the liver instead of pouring into the inferior vena cava? Here you see that we have some tiny structures inside. We call them lobule, hepatic lobule, and so many metabolism is done inside that, and those are the place that the continuation of those capillaries, those are capillaries that we call it sinusoid capillaries. That's one type of capillary that you learn in this chapter, and you need to know the example of that. Sinusoid capillary, that they have big gap on the wall so that the big material can pass through them, like some of the things that have been made in the liver, as those are big molecule, needs to get back into the blood. Now those ones are joining each other and finally making these veins. We have a few of them, not only one. We call those ones hepatic vein. Pay attention to the difference of hepatic portal vein that goes into the liver and hepatic vein that after liver brings back all the venous blood of the liver out of the liver to pour into the inferior vena cava, and just after a short distance passes through the diaphragm and goes into the heart. So that's about the hepatic portal cyst. So pay attention that, as I said, these are important, and also we have the fetal circulation that I explained that all completely in that video, so I don't want to take your time. Just pay attention that in the extra credit, so this pre-lab worksheet is not mandatory, and there is no point for that because you have a pre-lab discussion. But as I said, I highly recommend that. But also it can help you a lot in the extra credit that you have here for the drawing of the blood vessels, because you are using the same vessels of the body to draw, right? So let's go and see what is that extra credit for the drawing of the blood here. That, as I wrote here, and it has 4 points. as the name is saying, this is extra credit. It still is not mandatory, but I believe that that's a good time to get some extra credit, right? But pay attention that you have to pay attention to all the instructions, especially regarding the coloring, because you are going to put lots of vessels next to each other to help to follow them and distinguish them. One big part is to make the arteries or draw the arteries as red and draw the veins as blue, right? Just for purpose of seeing them. It has nothing to do with the oxygenation of the vessel, the blood inside of each vessel. It's just to be able to distinguish artery from the vein, okay? And I put each set of the vessels area by area, right? First, above the diaphragm. What we have above the diaphragm. We start from the heart, and I put all the things that you need, all the vessels that you need to know, the vessels that are, we call them big vessels that are connecting to the heart, right? From the aorta, branches of that, and the pulmonary trunk and its branches. So these are the arteries and their vein that are getting back the blood next to these arteries. Now what you are going to do, for example, here, you are going to, in each area, instead of just drawing some lines for the blood, first you put a frame. Like here you put the heart here, and then make clear that which chamber of the heart. You just need 4 lines: right atrium, left atrium, right ventricle, left ventricle, so that we understood that you know that where those veins are coming back, where those arteries are coming out of the heart, right? And then you put all those things. Something similar to, like if I want to make an example, a heart like this, it doesn't have to be very sophisticated, just some line, right? To show that this is heart and the 4 chamber that it has. And then you start drawing the arteries and next to them veins, right? If you like, you can make it complete like a lumen with that, but if you not, you can just put 1 line as the vessel, right? But the more beautiful is the better, isn't it? And then for all the other parts, like after the heart, then you have the below diaphragm part here for the abdomen and pelvis, arteries of the abdomen, like all branches that are separating from the, like aorta, celiac trunk artery, superior mesenteric and inferior mesenteric artery. Pay attention that these are the single branch, these 3. We have some other branches that they go to the both sides, like for the kidney, renal artery, gonadal artery that goes to the gonads, or some others that haven't been mentioned here, like we have some lumbar arteries when you see them on the pictures. Then it ends to the branching, makes the common iliac artery. Then we continue that one in the next part that we talk about when they go into the lower limb, pelvis and lower limb, right? And then you see that inside of the abdomen you have the hepatic portal circulation that I already explained that all. I expect that you put these ones completely as I explained, including the naming and the connection. Pay attention that you have to write the name next to the vessels. Please do not put number here and put those number into the pictures. You won't get point for that one. You have to write the names in next to each vessel that you put. Otherwise, this is my job to just go back, oh, this number, is it correct or not? I should get some point, not you, right? So if you want to get all the points, you have to write the name next to each vessel that you draw. And the other parts are the veins that are equivalent or going alongside, or this one that have been written here. So you have to put only the ones that have been written here, although you know that we have tons of the vessels that we haven't named here, but these are the main one, and you will be asked in your exams as much as this point, not beyond. And then you have shoulder and upper extremities, arteries and vein. Pay attention that, as you see, arteries are less compared to the vein because we have some superficial vein here. And also for the lower extremity, hip and lower extremity, that again you have arteries and veins. So this is all the extra credit. Any question regarding that one? Now let's back to the main business, right? Although I actually explained so far most parts of the lab, the work that you have to do and the things that you need to know. So as you see, after that pre-lab worksheet that I explained, you have the list of the artery and veins that you need to know, and you will be asked in the lecture and lab exams. And for that one, to practice on those ones, we have some microscopic slides that is about the microscopy, about the lecture part that you had about the structure of the artery, vein, and capillaries that you need to know and see them. That we have them in the Google Photo Gallery. Then we have the models for the microscopy and the gross anatomy, that we have the torso of the vessels, like for example the big vessels that are going into the heart or coming out of the heart. That's the best place to see those ones. And the circulatory system plaque, that is this one. That's very important to know every vessels on that one. Muscled arm and muscle leg, that some vessels can be seen on those ones. And blood vessels, this is the model of the blood vessel. It is not here, but you have it in the Google Photo Gallery. We have big models of the wall of the a portion of the vessels that when you pay attention to the thickness of the wall and the layers that you have and compare that to your to the lecture part, then you differentiate which one is the artery, which one is the vein. We have some models that shows both of them next to each other, or it might be like a vessel that have been divided to two parts and the other one next to that, or it might be artery separate, vein separate, right? But I believe that I have explained those ones in the previous video for previous semester that I had. And then we have the fetus, that we have the model for the fetus, and I believe it's more than one model that we have. So make sure that you see the part of the fetus that is in the picture that I put over there here too. And also for the skull that we had, that we saw the circle of Willis inside of that skull. Now you have the whole skull that you can see inside of the skull for circle of Willis, and also outside of the skull. Don't forget about that one, to go and continue and see the branches of the external carotid artery that go outside of the skull. And cervical vertebra with vessels, that you have the vertebral artery over there. Then you have some charts for the circulatory system. That is something like this, that is naming everything actually over that one. And circle of the Willis and the vascular system plus viscera, that is showing that next to each viscera, each internal organ of the body, we have some vessels next to them. Pay attention that we're not going over more detail about all these organs, like for example we just say renal artery, renal vein, but we're not talking about more than that for now. When we get to the kidney, then we talk about what will happen to those renal artery and how they are branching, and then finally get back to the inferior vena cava as a renal vein. But for now, as much as have been mentioned in the study guide and learning objective, you're gonna learn at that much. Then I talked about the post-lab worksheet, that is extra credit. We have a pre-lab discussion that I will show you, and you have a Zoom meeting to go over all these ones and make a group of 4 to divide the material A, B, C, and D as has been written and divided already for you. And you're gonna go over all these ones, each one of you. As you see, you have the first one that includes all these parts that mostly are the ones that are separating from the heart and coming out. As you see, these are the arteries above the diaphragm, veins above the diaphragm. I put these two next to each other to make it easier to compare and to see that in which places they have the same naming and what are the differences in the naming of the things. But as you see, they are going alongside each other with some exception, for example, azygous way, right? And then part A has some parts of the microscopic slides and some models that, as have been mentioned here, which parts you need to pay attention to those ones. And part B has this is for the arteries and these are for the vein. Pay attention, both slides, microscopic slides and models have to be covered regarding each part B and part A. Then we go to the below diaphragm, right? So below diaphragm, when we go to the abdomen and then all the way down, we have arteries in this side, vein in this side. So as you see, we have the abdominal aorta and the branches, and then goes all the way when it goes to the common iliac and all those other things. And also hepatic portal circulation, although they are vein, but are covered with this part, with arteries below diaphragm. Not that these are included, these are separate, but this person has to cover this one. For the part D, the person D covers the vein below the diaphragm, and then also for the fetal circulation. So these are the parts that you need to know from the fetal circulation. Pay attention that I believe that I have explained these ones. If not, I will put the video for that one because I don't want to make it very long, and I will explain how the fetal circulation is different from the adult circulation. And pay attention that after birth, some of the vessels that has been coming from the mother or were going back into the mother, when we close the umbilical cord and we cut it, there is no more connection. Therefore, after a while, they become thick and they get closed. There is no more lumen, there will be no vessel over there, and they change into the ligament. And you need to know, besides that, you know all the fetal circulation and the vessels that has been existed in the fetus, but you need to know the structures that are getting closed and the ligaments that we have in the adult instead of those vessels, right? So I believe I have the video for that. I checked the video that is from the spring. If it is not there, I will put another separate video for you regarding that. So that is all that we have for this lab for all blood vessels. Any question? Pay attention that I understand that these are so many words, but these are part of the body that you need to know. These are all the roads that are connecting the whole body to each other. Therefore, that's very important that you study all these vessels very well and know the name, and in this way you are connecting the whole body to each other, and that's the things that you always need them and always you will remember them. I believe that these are a little bit at least easier than the muscles and all those things because each one has its own unique location and shape. Right? So that was regarding the lab 25 for blood vessels. Now let's go back. This lab become very long. I hope you're still there. So, okay. Alright, so here, this is the one that I told you. I put the blood vessels region by region in the PowerPoint that you have for the brain, chest and abdomen and pelvis, coronary vessels, the vessels that you already have had for the heart. This is a good place to review them. Upper limb and lower limb and the fetal circulation. So you have all the vessels of the body, and each one of them include artery and veins, right? So these have been taken from the Marieb textbook, and the pictures are amazing and the explanations are very detailed. You will not have any problem to following those ones. So I highly recommend to go and study this one. Then after this, okay, this is the video from the last semester that many of the explanation regarding those blood vessels are here. Therefore, the assignment, as we have the pre-lab discussion for the blood vessels, and here, first pay attention to the initial reply due date 22nd and the peer reply 25th. I try to put some material relating to the blood vessels to show the significance of the blood vessels and how the blood vessels, if not working well and healthy, then how some diseases may happen that involve the whole body, including the important organs like the heart, brain, kidney, and all those things. So here is talking about the high blood pressure, and here is talking about the symptoms of the high blood pressure. And this one is talking about the varicose vein. If, for example, some people, usually due to the type of the job or the usual lifestyle that they have, because as we talked in the chapter that the vein doesn't have a pump for the blood inside of them to go out. I mean a pump like a heart that push the blood actively, so they are dependent on the, for example, another type of pump that are actually the muscles that we have around each vein to push the blood, and also the valve that we have over there so that doesn't let the blood get back down, right? But even these mechanisms, if the blood stays for a long time in those veins without moving, without the muscles to work and to push the blood so that it doesn't move, makes the stasis inside, and then makes the vessels, those veins, to get loose wall, and then finally they bumps out. That's the one that we call it varicose vein. So I believe that will be interesting. And also this one is talking about, so that one was about the vein, this one is about the arteries. When sometimes the wall of the artery is not strong and it has a weak point, so that the part of that bulges out, that's the one that we call it aneurysm. And how important it is that in one set of a big rush of a blood, because that one will have a very thin wall compared to the whole wall of the artery, it may get ruptured easily. And if like it might be in the brain, it might be in the aorta itself, and each one of them might be fetal. So I think that these are interesting to know about any of them. Just choose one or how many that you like, and then talk about that with your classmate, right? And then the final parts. That this is the Zoom meeting that you're doing as usual for the parts A, B, C, D as I explained. Then this is the extra credit that I explained about that. This is the labeling model extra credit that I explained, and this one is the picture assignment that they use there for the chapter 24 respiratory system. Due is before the 20th November 22nd. So that was all about today. Let me pause this.